that most of the time when Jesus was doing something big, it usually was an interruption. He was on his way to do something else, but on the way, Jesus would encounter something, and that's when the big story began. So, think about it. Jesus is interrupted by a blind person, and he heals them. Jesus is interrupted by a woman who is hemorrhaging blood, and there's a crowd of people, and Jesus goes, "Who touched me?" And the disciples were going, "What? There's a crowd here. What do you mean, who touched me?" But he said, "I felt virtue. I felt power go out of my body." And the woman cowers up and goes, "It was me," and God healed her this hemorrhage. And so the big stories in the Gospels usually were an interruption. And this was no different. This is a story out of Matthew and chapter 8. And it was about a centurion who really cared a lot about his servant. Verse 5, it starts as, "Now when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to see him, pleading with him." There's the interruption. And he's saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, dreadfully tormented." And Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion, what does he say? "Lord, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak the word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me, and I say to this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." And Jesus heard this, and he marveled. And he said, "I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel." Jesus was really impressed with the centurion because he understood that Jesus had authority, and Jesus didn't have to do any song and dance. Jesus didn't have to accompany him. Jesus could just say the word. In short, centurion trusted that Jesus could do stuff. So now, are you irritated by interruptions? Is that who you are? You're a Christian, and you're saying you're a follower of Jesus, and then when your plans get interrupted, how do you take it? Are you following the model? Are you like Jesus? Or instead, are you really, really torqued because somebody's ruining your day? Probably not the way you should respond. Let's talk about that. If you want to catch how often this was happening, because Jesus, he tells the centurion, "Go your way, and as you believe, let it be done for you." Jesus said, "Wow, this guy, he trusts me." And so they head off. They're going over to Simon's house, Simon Peter, the apostle, And they get there, and they're at Peter's house. In verse 14, it says, "And he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever." So the mother-in-law is sick. And what does Jesus do? He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. Now, I'm not sure, if Peter was involved in this, and maybe just saying, "We ain't getting no dinner unless she's well." So I don't know if that, maybe Jesus said, "Hey, this gal's a really good cook." But the idea is this. He just goes from one interruption to the next, and he takes it in stride. I'm thinking that often for us, our biggest struggle is that we kind of like to have things, all of our ducks in a row. We kind of like to have things planned. I'm going to have my spiritual life planned. I'm going to live a compartmentalized faith. I do my Christian life by going to a church service on Sunday. And I just kind of relegate my entire Christian faith life to Sunday. But that's not really how it works. This is a 24/7 proposition. And if you're going to be a disciple, remember, Jesus didn't live his life in isolation. These disciples followed him, and the multitudes followed him. And they got to see how Jesus, the Son of God, faced the world. And what Jesus did is he did have a plan. He did go regularly as far as to the temple or a synagogue. He did have structured worship in his life. But Jesus represented his Father, the creator of the universe, faithfully 24/7, everyday life. And so if you're going to be a follower of Jesus, you need to understand that this is a 24/7 commitment, and you don't compartmentalize it, and go to church on Sundays, or maybe you don't even do that. You're a Cheester. You go on Christmas and Easter. I don't know how you've relegated your faith life, but unless you're having interruptions, I mean God interruptions in your life, where you're actually doing the work of God's kingdom by really, really blessing other people, you're missing out. Your faith really is kind of useless. And I like it when I'm helping somebody and they say to me, "You're really useful." That actually means I'm contributing something. Other than the times you offer to help a real carpenter do carpentry, and you're asking, so will there be a discount if I help? And the carpenter says, "No, I'm going to charge you more." That's not how it is with God's kingdom. God's got the patience to help us navigate this learning curve of learning to deal with interruptions and see God work in everyday life. So don't be irritated by interruptions, and understand that also you're not the only one God's working with. You might encounter a centurion who, he's already believing on his own. You might be there for somebody that already has God working in their life, and the two of you together see something awesome happen because you wear your faith on the outside instead of hiding it on the inside. So, God wants to bless you with interruptions. God wants you to thrive.
Have you ever experienced an interruption in life that had God's fingerprints all over it? Explain. How can interruptions help you to grow spiritually? When faith is a 24/7 thing, how does it affect everyday life? Thanks for watching. If you'd like to enjoy more by the Vineyard Church, like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/The Vineyard Church Iron Range. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Vineyard Church Iron Range. Or visit our website, www.ironrangevineyard.org. Lastly, subscribe to our e-newsletter to stay connected. Do so by visiting our website and clicking subscribe to our e-newsletter on the homepage.